One for sorrow, two for this. A secret language is being written across the sky. Furtive messages spelled out on the blue canvas. Clandestine instructions we didn't even know were being passed around by the birds. These silent murmurs, this awesome whoosh of dashing in unison, summoning each other without a single call. Miraculous attunement to a million wings. Emergence of form from seeming chaos. This inborn ability to pay attention to everything. Coming into synchrony to offer ourselves to something greater. This murmuration. Some grand experiment in instinct, knowing we always fly adjacent to one another. Contributing to something beyond what we know, and all along the way, reconnecting the disjointed. Re-inhabiting this sky village to which we all belong, turning in excitement this way and that, just to find out where we can or might go together. Africa. Let me begin in gratitude. Thank you, Mother Africa. Thank you for welcoming back your children from every corner of the world, all the places that you once sent them to and from which they have returned here. Africa. Thank you, Mother Africa, for hosting us in beauty, in abundance and comfort, in song and dance. Africa. Thank you, Mother Africa, for all your riches, that the original stewards of this land that I will not even attempt to pronounce have treasured and respected since our emergence from the cradle of humankind nearby. Africa. Thank you for holding up a mirror to us, showing us what we have become. Astonishing bundles of creativity and cruelty, what we have made of ourselves and this place, how we have enriched and also failed each other right here and everywhere in this confluence of extraction and neglect. Othering and belonging, creating the tension of opposites, of extraordinary wealth and abject poverty that can and maybe will propel us to our next station in our evolution on planet Earth. Africa. And last but not least, thank you to all those who, with their deeper instincts and higher minds, their passion and endurance brought us together here. The lead organizing team, Laura, Bruce, Kyla, and her representatives here at the conference, the whole hosting team and the sponsor that made it possible, the IT support team, thank you, all the volunteers and logistics team, and all the caring staff who served and fed us, and all, of course, the speakers and artists whose art is very much represented here. Please join me in giving them a huge thanks. So now we're here, almost past tense. What was that all about? There is no way for me to offer you as integrative and fully digested and synthesized perspective on this. I have had a major case of FOMO this entire time. Always sessions I wanted to be at the same time with where I was. Also didn't get much sleep. But it is a unique meeting of these two communities, the transformations community, some members of the Earth Systems Governance Project community, a new kind of murmuration, if you will. As many of you know, and many of you might not, I identify primarily with the transformations community and have been coming to these meetings almost every time, and have had that privilege of either helping to launch them or reflect on them as we close. And so I come with this bias of seeing this meeting first through the lens, if you will, of a repeat attender of the transformations conferences. And what struck me this time, and I've heard this said to me so many times, especially from people who have never been here before, is the energy. The sense of friendship, community, homecoming. It is as if us human starlings, us migratory birds, common now on every continent, native and invasive, have to occasionally come home to rest, reconnect, recharge, come home to, if you will, our starling box. We need but a place to come back to. Every so often, a small home for us to come together. The relief of breathing as one for a while. Holding and being held, humming too as one, until we remember who we are, or could be, so that we can fly off again, out into the world, where things are now so achingly, unnervingly coming apart. Nominally, we came to share our work, elegantly grouped here under these 5 overlapping themes. The themes themselves rather hidden beneath the words, the language with which we talk about our work, or maybe embedded in or emergent from our work. For me, the first and the last of these themes, let me just go back, bridging, bonding, and transformative culture and learning. These were maybe most visible, whereas the second and the third, we seem to create a bit of a social norm that they are not okay to maybe name. I don't know how many times we were in plenary when somebody said, well, I don't really want to talk about that. Why are we apologetic to talk about Trump and all the other autocrats? We live, after all, in a world, by some metrics, where 72% of the world's population lives under autocratic rule. Should we not be looking much more head-on at how to transform under fascism and all the varied forms of autocracy now growing around the world? Maybe we must take what we preach much more seriously and bring that world into our little bubble. Both in the preferred spheres of the transformations community and of the Earth System Governance Project, I think there is room to grow our courage to name it, study it, and put forward concrete propositions, and also engage it. So what are some of those preferred spheres? It seems to me that even though our two communities have met here for the first time explicitly, I mean, there were overlaps in attendance before, but we're only beginning to align, to orient together in this complex world with our distinctive complementary viewpoints. So let me talk to you a little bit about what I think some of those themes, our preferred places of convergence are. The first one, and again, I start with my biased view of the transformations community, it seemed a lot of the sessions that I observed were really focused around place-based actors, actions, practices, the arts included in that, and now maybe more established than ever in this community, our inner dimensions work, the deep work we must do to transcend worldviews, values, some of the things that you raised earlier. On the other side, and quite often actually, I found myself in sessions that didn't have much of the TC community in those sessions. That realm of policy, politics, and governance that is so familiar and comfortable for the ESG community seemed where they most met was in sessions focused on systems, right? Where we sort of looked at these complexities together. And of course, so much emphasis now, more so than in the early parts of the Transformations conferences, all this work that we put forward here on TD, science, policy, practice, engagement, that actually can transcend, but is still quite novel, I think, to the ESG community. And just this afternoon, or today, I would say, much more critical work around the role of resistance, both resistance of the incumbent regimes, but also the resistance of, or the efforts, social movements to try to create more progressive changes. And interestingly, a very diverse set of ways of looking at the natural environment. It was in some places just backdrop, in some places the place of or the source of pressures and disruptions, of course, as often as resource, but it also, we began to talk about it as sacred or as having its own agency. I think that was, for me, a novelty in this particular realm. So how do we then align our communities a little bit more effectively? How do we truly fly together, if you will, as one giant murmuration? So here's a little scientific fact for you. Biologists have actually discovered what makes these creatures of birds actually go together, fly together. What's really interesting for me is that for the birds in a murmuration to make these crazily synchronized movements, each bird seems to have to attune or be aware of and track 7 other birds. 7 points of reference. Tracked continuously, there's no going to sleep there, or else it's crashing, to be able to make these very rapid adjustments and fly in some kind of magical coherence. So 7 points of reference. Isn't that funny? There's 7 bubbles on here. And I'm not even talking about the different theories or disciplines from which we come and look at these 7 bubbles. That would make that a little bit more complex than I can handle at the moment. But what if we all, in all of our work going forward, regardless of where we focus mainly, where we come from, at all times, were to pay attention, serious attention, to 7 other points of reference? The other ones on this picture. And not just as context, but as critical point of leverage, as critical points of influence on what is happening, as factors taken seriously in description, analysis, and explanation, maybe even prediction. And if that sounds overwhelming, which, I understand there's many hurdles to that, but is it not important for those who work with funders, who work with university administrators, to start to build programs and collaborations that actually have a spot for all of those, so that we more effectively actually get in touch with all the different literatures and insights that are happening in other places? You don't have to know everything. But what if there was some representation of these 7 things in your projects, in your departments, in your programs? I guess a similar point here could be made for both our case studies or our cases of systems. What if we didn't just study one system, but put it in relationship to 7 other cases or systems to actually understand the complexity? I know that is a lot. Not everyone has to do everything. The point is, how are we collaborating? How are we bringing the 7 other voices in the room that are not here, right? To echo the point that was made earlier. And maybe, as Karen O'Brien reminded us, we need to simply make the most, or we will make the most solid and most beautiful new fabric if we weave our threads in that way together. All right, enough of that heady stuff. let's focus on what nourished us here. And it seems to me, and I have it on pretty good authority from around 400 other scientists, literally many, many people have come up to me and said this as the first thing when I ask them, what do you like about this conference? What really touched everyone was the empathy here. That was maybe, in many ways, the most unforgettable marriage of detailed science and unbelievable artistry, of head and heart, of complex history and complex present, of tragedy and possibility. I'm not sure I have ever been this moved by another performance or activity at any of the previous Transformations conferences, and that is actually saying quite a bit, because each one was innovative and edgy and courageous and creative, each in its own way. But in just a couple of hours, our hearts were opened, our minds blown, our spirits lifted, and our passions lit on fire. So let us commit to keeping this fire alive. Let the temptations to return to business as usual that are pretty much all pervasive, the pressures to forget all around us, let's hold them at bay as long as we can. So let me end with something that I have learned from watching birds come together in a murmuration. They do so, after all, for safety in numbers, for defending against predators and precarity, for making magic together for a while before they go back out into the world to fend for themselves or with a far smaller number of fellow birds. Let us remember, at least for a while, maybe until next time, before we forget why we came. Remembering and forgetting. Voices have gathered around this fire. They came from all the corners of this earth. They arrived speaking different languages, and yet here, flying sparks in the night, they remembered. They can hear and speak this other tongue, this language of yearning for the thing without name. Here they remember they were made from holy air and fire, from seasoned wood and shadowed ground, from those who died and those who came to life. Here they remember the light they carry. And when they leave, they will forget, as we all do, drifting off back again from whence they came or where they're called to serve. They will forget that they have come maybe for 1 billion years to draw a brief and bright tail across the sky, to shine maybe no more than a few seconds, this long and lonely journey of becoming visible to the eye, dreaming themselves alive, dazzling and shining for just a moment or eternity, despite the dark. Thank you.